Well, hello, Tawana. Thank you so much for joining me. Before we talk about today's woman and the exciting news that you have with that, I want to tell you, I've done my homework a little bit on you. I cannot keep up with everything you do. I mean, from NAC to Jedi to AFM, which is fashion, to your business on Fourth. Tell me a little bit about everything you're entrenched to just briefly, and I'll get to more of it later, asking more details. But you are, I mean, really, really impressive with everything you're doing.
Well, thank you, Rachel. I really, really appreciate that. I guess I should start by saying I am like a project manager, a self-proclaimed project manager. NAC was my first company where we would handle large moving parts for marketing initiatives. And during that process, we took on so many different clients. So we were in so many different industries. And I was always responsible for assembling the project team that would work on said projects. And so when I think about my business portfolio, I really think of them as a project. And I look for the best talent to head up that specific project so that I am not working in the business, but actually helping them work on the business and creating a vision that they have the expertise to execute. So you mentioned, AFM Threads, Encore on Fourth, which will soon be rebranded to the Black Jockeys Lounge to celebrate the history that the Black Jockey brought to the Kentucky Derby. NAC is still there. That's my baby. We do large scale printing solutions. And then Jedi, while not really my company, it belongs to the community, started Jedi really because it was eye opening when COVID first hit that we didn't have a Black founded and predominantly Black led organization to dole out grants like we have with many other foundations like Geens or James Brown. So it was really intriguing to me that that didn't exist. And so there were a group of leaders that kind of looked at me like, well, who else better to create it, Tawana, than you? And so we hit the ground running and we got that thing stood up. So it really is, Rachel. It's a blessing to be able to have a vision, but the bigger blessing is really having leaders whom are willing to follow your vision and actually run and execute the vision. I wish I could say and take credit for all of it, but it really truly is just an amazing group of people that are helping steer the ship.
But one thing about this ship that I've noticed with you, the common thread appears to be empowerment, lifting voices, diversity, and making sure that everybody is given that chance. And that does seem to be the common thread with you.
It is, and ironically enough, one of the projects that I did not mention, the Derby Diversity Business Summit, which I think once I really got involved in that, and more people started asking to speak to me about it, and why I felt it was important, and I started to recognize this common theme across the business portfolio, and that is I'm typically creating products or venues that was driving inclusivity. I don't look at people or relationships based on a type of person. I just really love the rich diversity because it just makes life so much more interesting. And I have had just been really blessed to have such a diverse network. And I would realize when people would often ask, like, well, how are you doing this? Or how did you get invited to that? Or, how? And I always realized that it was because I had such a diverse network. So how do I allow other people to tap into that and create more diverse networks for themselves?
Let's talk about today's woman because the news is just really being announced that you have decided to purchase this. Tell me, what was it about that magazine and that entity that caught your attention where you said, you know what, I'm going to take this on too?
Sure, sure. Well, first I should say it's always been a lifelong dream to have a publication. And my rationale for always wanting it, as you notice, I work hard, but I like to play hard too, just by some of the businesses within the portfolio, the entertainment venue, the fashion. And naturally, I like to bring people together. And so what better platform to be able to do that than through a publication? And, Kathy has just done a tremendous job over the years, keeping that publication alive, being very intentional about who was covered and the various stories that were told. And so for me, I really want to have the opportunity to continue to uplift women, to empower women, and to create a platform where more women can connect with one another. So, right now they're very well known for their print publication, but I'm really looking forward to its future in the digital space and how women can cross, collaborate, exchange stories, ideas, be authentic and lift one another up. So I'm very, very excited about having the opportunity to do that for women in our region.
And I should say you've been featured in that magazine as one of their most admired. So I want to make sure that I point that out as well. So you see that as increasing the footprint in digital. That might be one of the changes that we see as far as a shift in the future.
Sure, sure, absolutely. And yes, was a most admired woman. And so it was really interesting when the news broke that the magazine was selling and they had put out the RFP. Between text messages and emails and phone calls, I had like 20 different people saying, Tawana, this is you. You need to do this. You absolutely need to do this. So because I missed the first email about the RFP. And so when I went in and I looked at it and I thought, you've always wanted a publication, you've been featured in this publication, and the timing could not have been better for a lot of the work that I'm doing around driving sisterhood across race and culture. So this gives us the opportunity to do just that.
You know you're in the right space, I think, when all of your friends and people who know you come to you and say, "Tawana, this is speaking to you." So what does that say? There's something that speaks to about you that so many saw you in that.
That is true. That is very true. I think for me, I definitely said, okay, well, what I'm doing is working, because oftentimes when you are working on something or just involved in things in general, you never know whether or not people are beginning to really know you for that work. And so the fact that many people automatically said, with what you do, this is perfect, lets me know that that it's working. So.
Let's talk about the sisterhood because I think that magazine is a lot about that and lifting up women, all women. And one word that I noticed in one of the articles that I read about you was if you said that there was a word to describe you was resilient. What has the pandemic, the fight for racial equity, we're now seeing barriers being broken when it comes to our vice president with Kamala Harris. I mean, it just seems that there's so much synergy now about women, particularly women of color. What do you think is resonating right now in this moment that is working in this space?
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. I'll do my
Yeah,
best.
that was a lot. I'm sorry. Let's
It's
break it
okay.
down first, resilient, and then we'll go to
Yeah,
the others. Let's tackle resilient first with you.
yeah. It's COVID really, really peeled back so much for me, Rachel. Um, while I'm always aware, right? I'm always aware of the issues that exist in society. Um, I've never been in a position where I was really forced to look at them with a magnifying glass. And that's really what happened during COVID, which was shortly before or erupted shortly before civil unrest did. And I recognize that what's important isn't always just growing something, isn't always just being known for, this business or that business, but it's really about what you leave behind, the lives you touch, the lives that you change. And so I have been just so fortunate to lean forward during that time, and following my gut to help ease a lot of anguish that people were just having, especially women of color. Um, when I think about where I got my resilience from, I think of the word grit, and I always kind of really lean back on my mom. My mother, before she later went on to obtain her master's degree, she was raising three girls with a ninth grade education, and to watch a woman when the men walked out, um, make sure that we still received a good education, food on the table, clothes on our back, make it to church on Sundays. I learned very early the abilities that women really can have because I saw it up close and personal. And so my mother's ability to do all of that with a ninth grade education and then later go on and walk across that stage and obtain her diploma has always resonated with me. And so when I get into moments of, oh my gosh, the world is crashing, I think back to that mother that really knew how to make a dollar out of 15 cents. And so I want to say it's like almost innate, it's second nature that, Tawana, you got to roll up your sleeves and you've got to dig in because failure isn't an option. Falling on your face is not an option. And while some things I will fail at, that's okay, but I've got to be willing to get back up, and so that's really what COVID did for me is it reminded me the importance of when you fall to get back up. Um, I also like to say that COVID kind of brought out Tawana 2.0. There were oftentimes things that would run through my mind when I was in certain settings with certain groups. I now I talk way more about it, and I've had conversations, especially with my white girls friends prior to, about the privileges that were afforded them that were not afforded me. But I always realized that it was very difficult for them to grasp and for them to understand. So, one of the other things about COVID and civil unrest in 2020 is the world was forced to sit down and people saw things in a way that we traditionally would not have seen them. Starting with Amy Cooper in New York, with the calling the police on the guy that was birding. You've always tried to explain that, but words don't do it any justice the way a visual will. And the visual plus the words was like that aha moment, especially for my white sisters that were like, oh, okay, we get it now. And then there was just,
Yeah.
yep, we get it so much, so much, so much. So back to why I think, it's resonating now, why women of color in particular. Well, I think when you have a sisterhood, right? If you, Rachel, have a Black woman that you say, you know what, this is my one of my dearest friends, or I think of her as a sister. Many white women do have really close Black girlfriends that they really think of as a sister. Well, could you imagine having to look at your sister and say, I don't know why you are at the bottom of the economic ladder when there's so many wonderful, amazing things about Black women, or you all actually are accelerating when it comes to the highest educated in the country. So, how is that? I think that people recognize that what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong, and that data doesn't lie. And so if this is the case, what do we do about it? How do we really change the narrative? And men have had a shot at trying to do this for a very long time. If you look back 100 years ago from today, you read the newspapers about the racial unrest and or civil unrest that was taking place, and just change the dates, it would sound pretty much like what's happening now. And so I believe that it's going to be women. I believe in my heart of hearts that it's going to be women to change the trajectory, to change the outcomes of the future generations, because there is a level of resilience and there is a level of enough is enough that we bring to the table. And by uniting women across all races to solve an issue for one race, is not impossible. And I think that it's just going to be women that gets it done. So I am excited that I have so many people that have said, you know what, I want to do something. And I do not want to leave this to my kids and my grandkids to figure out.
Very good. I love that. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about um, is moving forward. You said that Black women, that is the belly, the fire in your belly as well. And I loved that.
It is, I mean, one, I'm a Black woman, right? Two, I don't like knowing that there's a problem and not actually doing something about it, right? There's one thing to talk about it, and there's a whole nother thing to do something about it. And whatever it takes to help reposition how America, and I use America because, I'm an American woman, how America can really change the outcome as it relates to Black women is key. There's this, I don't know why, I don't know where this comes from, but there is this ideology that if you put a Black woman in leadership, her only goal is to take over. And I don't really know where that comes from. Like, we are definitely I think about my best friend. Yesterday I wasn't really feeling well, and she came in here like, "We're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, we're gonna get you together." But the strength and the cultural ways in which Black women communicate, is just a cultural thing. It's not a I am this way, and so therefore, if you put me in a position, I'm going to take over everything. And so I want to change that stereotype. I want to change the stereotype that we're angry all the time. And it's interesting, Rachel, because I was thinking or reflecting on an incident that happened to me years ago. I was attending a Homerama show, and many people, when parking had spaces had filled up in certain areas, began to kind of park alongside the road, and some of their cars were on people's lawns. And I'll never forget um, parking on this lawn. And when I came out, there was a daughter, it was a white family. The daughter came out and she was just yelling at me and yelling at me. And so everybody began to gather. And I think what they were about parking on the lawn. And at the time, I think the way that people were, the way that they were expressing themselves is that they almost were trying to um, prevent me from retaliating. But what no one realized is that I was so afraid. I mean, I literally I started crying because I felt bad that I had made her feel as though she needed to yell in order for me to correct the situation. And what I recognized in the look in her family's eyes and even in hers, she was shocked and then mortified that I was sobbing. And so I recognize that there are these stereotypes that we think exist within one another, that is we're not monolithic. All Black women aren't going to yell or get upset. And in that very moment, I was so distraught. It took me like several hours for my nerves to calm down because I couldn't understand why was she so aggressive, and why did everyone think they were like telling her, you better calm down, because it was almost like they were expecting, because I was Black, she had to calm down because I was going to do something. And when I actually began to cry because I was so scared, quite frankly, and taken aback, the fact that people were shocked that I was crying really explained to me that people think that Black women have this sort of anger in them that just isn't always the case, right? Don't get me wrong. You got some angry Black women, you got angry Asian women, angry Hispanic women, right? There's all of it.
Right.
It's not just associated by race. And so those are just things that I think are important, because in the event that that young lady thought that that's the way that I have to handle a Black woman who has done something wrong, I'm hoping that being able to showcase that we're not all the same, well, and I'm certain she learned that evening, that more women will react to things differently when they come into contact with someone, right or wrong, right? And how they address them, and how they interact with them. And so the only way in which that can really be done is that people can see people as human first. And what better way to show humans than through storytelling? So, I hope that answered your
It
question.
does, and I know you're gonna do so much more of that in today's woman as well. I love the sisterhood. I mean, we're seeing it resonate. I love the fact that you think it's now up to women to get it done,
I do.
and
I do.
long overdue, and progress being made. Because I have felt that with our suffrage exhibit, and looking at, women in more leadership roles and what that means and what that looks like, and the, empathy that's brought to the table in new ways that I haven't seen before, I have to say. I absolutely love. Let me ask you just a couple more questions because I know you're busy. Your hope for Louisville, where you see hope right now. It has been a tough year with the pandemic. It's been a tough year with racial equity. Where do you see hope moving forward?
You know, um, m- what I really hope to see is for people to really challenge their ideology, to challenge the thoughts that they're having. Even like when it comes to downtown, there are so many people right now that are like, I'm not going downtown. Um, And it's really intriguing to me because right now downtown is fine and downtown is great and downtown is open again, and getting people to really challenge themselves on what their internal belief system is, and being able to actually pair that with reality. So in the event that you may be afraid of something, or there you have this idea about something, to ask yourself whether or not you're willing to go check it out for yourself. And I think the more that we're willing to do that, whether it's downtown, whether it's the West End, whether it's people in general, whether it's getting to know someone you don't know, whether it's visiting a church that you would have never ever visited. Oftentimes, people in the Black community will say, when someone says, I want to be your friend, I want to get to know you better, one of the first ways in which they identify whether that person's serious or not is they say, come to church with me. Come to church with me on Sunday, right? And if they're willing to understand, like, hey, culturally, this is kind of how the Black church is versus, the white church, or, whatever. I just want people to really challenge themselves to learn new things, to explore new things, and to learn things for themselves, and not just let what you hear, read, or see be the end all be all.
And as we've said, with as uncomfortable as things have been, in that uncomfortable space, that is how we learn, that's how we change, right?
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
I am so excited for you. Can't wait to see with what you do with today's woman, the legacy that I know you're already working to leave with your mark. And really, thank you for all your great work that you're doing in Louisville.
Well, thank you, Rachel, for having me.
Thank you so much.
You too.